get your attention, please? Thank you very much. We still have folks who are arriving, and so there'll be a little bit of a trickle effect for folks coming in. And for my team in the back, please have them fill any of the empty seats that are up forward, and don't let them stand in the back, please. Good evening to everybody. My name is Rick Tryon. I'm the director of the Taylor Leadership Institute, and it's my pleasure to welcome you here this evening for the Dean's Leadership Forum. I believe that we've got a really interesting program for you this evening, but before we get started, let me start by extending my profound condolences to all of the New England Patriots fans who are in the audience here this evening. One of the transformational learning outcomes from the Super Bowl on Sunday was that Tom Brady is a far, far better quarterback than he is a wide receiver. And Nick Foles is as good a quarterback, but a far, far better wide receiver. So I think that played out. So tonight we have a unique opportunity to hear from our six sitting college deans on the subject of leadership as they view it from their unique perspective. Each of you should have a copy of the dean's bios along with this evening's program, and also an evaluation form that we will ask you to fill out, please, as we complete our program here this evening. Apart from our distinguished panel of deans, I'd like to take just a moment and recognize several special guests that we have here with us, and I'll start with, let's see, I was going to say Dr. Pam Challey, but I think Pam has been unavoidably delayed in joining us this evening, but she may be here. Here she is. Okay. So, as we say in the Marine Corps, late less than 5, reporting self. So welcome Pam. Pam, of course, is the interim provost and the vice president for academic affairs. And on the other side of the house, and on time, is Dr. Lucy Croft, the associate vice president for student affairs. A very special lady and a friend of the Taylor Leadership Institute is the chair of the Student Affairs Community Council, Dr. Ann Flipsy, MD. And from the Community Council also we have John Lucas, Bill Norris, and I haven't seen Barbara Sharp yet, but I'm told that she's on her way. And from the Military and Veterans Resource Center, we have Ms. Diane Stover representing. And joining us also is the director of the Center for Professional Development and Training here at the university, Mr. Kelly Harrison. Okay, Karen Lucas here. If I look past Karen Lucas, Karen is on her way, our director of admissions. Well, I'm going to stop right there in the interest of time and protocol, and at the risk of offending somebody who may have come in under the radar and undetected. So at this time, though, however, what I'd like to do is recognize the Taylor Leadership Institute staff, my team, who work aggressively and wonderfully over the course of the year, administering the TLI Leadership Minor and supporting a variety of programs that benefit the student body writ large. And my assistant director, Dr. John Frank, in the back. John, raise your hand, please. And we have Corey Hilliard, event coordinator. Corey, raise your hand. Our new outreach coordinator, Corinne Stoops. Corinne, where are you hiding? There you are. She's kind of shy and self-effacing, that's why she's outreach. Miss Lori Stanton, our office assistant. And Dr. Matt Olson, who is our faculty coordinator and liaison from the College of Education, was otherwise committed this evening, couldn't be with us here. But we also have our federal work study student assistant, Johnny Ballard. Thanks for being here. Well, what I'd like to do now is ask those faculty and students who are in attendance here from each of the colleges to please stand, beginning with the Hicks Honors College. So faculty and students from the Hicks Honors College, please stand up so the deans can get a good full profile. Okay. Okay, please be seated, and for the Honors College students, I'm going to ask you to stand again in turn with your respective college for your major. So next, Cogden College of Business. There you go. Okay. Brooks College of Health. College of Arts and Sciences. The College of Computing, Engineering, and Construction. Technical difficulties. And so the College of Education and Human Services. Once again, Deans, you know who your target audience is now, and thank you all for joining us here this evening. It's great to have everybody here. So tonight, I've asked our distinguished panel of Deans to address the subject of leadership from their individual and academic perspectives. No small task, particularly since I've given them 7 to 8 minutes in which to do that. The format for this evening's program is to have each of the deans speak alphabetically. Dean Tumio, okay, you're in place. He tried to change the alphabet on me here a few minutes ago, but I think we're back in alphabetical order again. Once all the deans have had an opportunity to present their thoughts, we'll move to a question and answer session. So take notes and don't be shy. The microphones for Q&A are in the center aisles. So to start this evening's leadership discussion, let's begin with the question: leadership. What is it? As indicated on the overhead screen, there's no universally accepted definition of leadership. It's elusive, yet it's a combination of both art and science. What we know of leadership for sure is that when a leadership dynamic exists, it's evident, discernible, and almost palpable. We know it when we see it. It's that interactive stimulus that produces change and culminates in the achievement of a specific end state. There is no formula, no recipe, no prescription for leadership. So despite the common, readily identifiable characteristics of leadership, it's unique to individuals, to human dynamics, to the uncertainties of circumstance and situation. And so with that as a preamble, let me turn to the panel and give our first speaker, Dean Chamberlain from the Hicks Honors College, the floor. So Dr. J, over to you, sir.
There.
Boy, that's power. I just want to say, first of all, it is a privilege and a joy to work with these folks. This is not a serene group, not a quiet group, but they are a phenomenal group to work with, and I have really enjoyed it, and it's just been great. I think you'll see a lot of fun tonight, as well as wisdom, and it's a great combination between the two. So I better get my comments started, or I will never end. I'm a minute in. See, they're already reminding me. Great. So to me, leadership in its most general sense is positively influencing other people. So from that side of things, and I'm not necessarily talking about managing people, I'm talking about influencing people somehow. And in that sense, the nice thing is anybody can be a leader. You just need to know what you are good at, be passionate about it, be right with what you do, and it will make a difference. And people will begin to recognize you, and you will be respected for it if you keep your approach that way. And I think of this in the academic sense. First of all, we were asked to think of leadership in academic and other ways, but academically, I saw this happen as I was in graduate school, and there were students who were trying to cheat the system. They were trying to get ahead in ways they couldn't. And particularly, I was at a workshop once, a seminar once, where somebody was proposing, I'm a historian, so they were proposing a historical theory, and everybody else in the room was saying, that's not going to fly, that's not going to work, and then a few other people said, no, that's the way you get known. is you throw something really controversial out there and let people react to it, and the fact that they have to react to it means that it's, and you know what? That's not leadership. That's not doing what's right. The people who were really leading there were the people who were saying, no, let's do it correctly, let's do it right. And we began to respect those people and those voices that began to say, wait a minute, that's not the way you do good history, that's not the way you do good academics. You need to be honest, approach it legitimately, approach it correctly, and that will begin to have an influence. And I've seen that over and over and over again in the academic world. Those who are out for some kind of gain or recognition, oftentimes it's fame and fortune because you don't, well, it's not fortune, it's fame because you don't get fortune in academics. But that's just it, is you got to get some way of getting recognized, and so it can be dog eat dog. And that's the wrong way to go about it, and most of those people end up being despised, not recognized as true leaders. So that's one way. Just be good at what you're doing and do it to the best of your ability. My father gave that advice to me years and years and years ago, and I thought, that's true. You know, just being good, you're not going to become a leader. But you know what? It really is that way. If you keep at something and you are good at it, you will become recognized, and you know what? You will often then be taken to the next step, which is some sort of managing, which is some sort of supervising, which is some sort of organizational work. And so supervisory in some regard or another. And I really saw this come to play, and I really didn't know it was happening. But I was tasked at one point to lead a task force, a group of people looking at a university where I first started teaching, and to try to figure out what were some ways to improve the undergraduate program. And we met as a group. Collaboratively, we came up with some solutions, some ideas, and the number one at the top of the list was start an honors program. And so I began to say, you know, this is what the committee has agreed to, and started going around and promoting the idea of starting an honors program. Well, as it turns out, there was some opposition to that idea. I was teaching at a Catholic Franciscan school, which some of you may know is about the most egalitarian place you could possibly be. And so the misconception of honors, and I believe it is a misconception of honors, as being elitist was there, and we had to adjust the expectations and understanding of what honors really meant. And so it took some real talking, but it was something that I had become convinced was really important, and people around me were convinced that it was really important. And so together we worked to start an honors program. It took us 7 years. 7 years, because we had to go through several iterations to convince faculty, to convince administration, and in fact it wasn't until we got a new administration. But it was keeping at it. It was constantly growing the group of people that became convinced, and ultimately it's believing in the product that you are achieving, that you're working to achieve, that makes you passionate, that really brings other people in. When you consult and listen to people, you're good to people, and you're willing to take the comments, you're willing to take the detractors' views, that you really start to make a difference. You have to have integrity and really hold fast to who you are as a person, and not take a lot of those comments and criticisms and sometimes direct out-and-out attacks. You have to take them with a grain of salt. I like the way Brene Brown talks about this, that you have to have integrity up front. You have a soft front and a hard back. I love that. Soft front, so you are open and real to everybody coming to you, but you also have backbone, and you keep moving in the ways that you see are most important. And people will ultimately join. People will see the value of what you're promoting, the value of what you're selling, the value of the approach that you're taking, and they're going to follow. And that, again, derives from doing what is right, having integrity, moving forward in what you see is right, and keeping at it, persisting until something is done. I've seen so many times that people have great ideas, and the first moment there's an opposition or a hint of disagreement, they drop it, because they're afraid that somebody is going to think poorly of them.
And ultimately, that means you have to believe in yourself enough that you keep moving and you keep going forward and you keep driving and keep getting the constructive criticism and working with that and collaborating with people in order to get it done. But it all goes back, I want to re-emphasize, it all goes back to being a person with integrity, to doing what is right. And you do what is right, and you keep doing what is right, regardless of what looks like it comes. I never imagined myself as dean of an honors college when I started teaching. The opportunity came to me in ways I did not expect. And so oftentimes those opportunities are going to be there if you are starting on a direction and you're pursuing a direction and you're going somewhere. And so it really does go back to find what you're interested in, keep going, and those opportunities, when they come up, take them and make good use of them, and don't be afraid of moving forward in those ways. So I'm going to leave it there since I am over 7 minutes. And moving along.
Over 7 minutes, but under 8. So terrific. I think what I heard from Dr. J was leadership can be learned for the benefit of my class. I heard the concept of emergent leadership. I heard values-based leadership, and I heard that age-old imperative, do the right thing. And so with that, we'll move to Dean Dawkins from Coggin.
Well, thank you. I'd like to first say, I want to bring you greetings on behalf of the faculty, staff, and students at the Coggin College. Welcome to the students, all the students here. I'd like to call out Penelope, who is my emissary tonight, so welcoming me here. But I'm happy to speak to you on behalf of leadership. Unlike Dean Chamberlain, I will say I actually did aspire to be a dean, and lo and behold, I am a dean. So I did plan on being a dean, so it works out differently for different people. But my definition of leadership is, I think it's the ability to create a vision, mission, and purpose and direction for your organization or for an organization in collaboration with the organization's members. And then also the ability to then motivate those members to strive for excellence as you pursue or you strive to achieve that vision, mission, purpose, as well as direction. And we were given some suggested questions, and the second question was, can leadership be learned? Well, business schools teach leadership, and we do a lot of executive education, so of course I'm going to say leadership can be learned, and we're happy to teach anyone about leadership. I'm happy to say the Tato Leadership Institute does a great job, and we're hoping to partner with them on some additional leadership development for our students here on campus, and hopefully eventually in the community. So I'm a firm believer that leadership can be learned, and I look at my life experiences and what has gotten me to this point and say that I can look to mentors at every step along the way, and following the guidance that they provided to me and the leadership they provided has actually gotten me to where I am in life. So for sure, I think it definitely can be learned. Is leadership relevant across the spectrum of academic fields? I think leadership is more important today than it ever has been. And I say that for a couple of reasons. Most of us are aware that the state continues to cut support for our higher education, which then puts more pressure on my dean colleagues, as well as the provost and other administrators, as well as parents and families, to be able to pay for your education and the value of that education and what it's going to do to your life trajectory and your path. And so, to me, it is critically important to have the right leadership. I do like what Dean Chamberlain said about integrity, and that's also important, because you can take corners, cut corners, and probably get ahead in life for a certain period of time. But at some point, that's probably going to catch up with you. And we were talking earlier today about Wells Fargo as an example. I hope no one's from Wells Fargo here, but if you are, I apologize. But Wells Fargo unfortunately cut some corners and did some things that probably weren't the best leadership practices, and they're paying a price now. The government's put some penalties on them, but eventually it catches up with you. So those shortcuts don't get you ahead. They may get you ahead in the short term, but usually it comes back to bite you. Just a couple of words about leadership competencies that I believe are important in career fields related not only to my academic discipline, but I would say for all of our academic disciplines. In my experience, I've leaned on collaboration. I think collaboration is critically important to being a successful leader. I think you have to be open and you have to be honest and transparent. And so I strive every day. Some of my faculty might disagree, but I strive to be collaborative. I strive to be open. I strive to be transparent. I strive to be honest. I believe in shared governance. That's not a term you hear in the public domain a lot, but in the academic world, you hear that term shared governance. And so I'm a supporter of shared governance. I think it's important to the academic enterprise that faculty are the backbone of a college, and as a collective group, we make better decisions than I would make individually as a dean. So I rely on my executive committee and my administrative team to help me make better decisions on behalf of not only the Coggan College of Business, but our students, our alums, our corporate partners, those who hire our students as well. So in everything I do, I think I try to strive to practice leadership with those thoughts in mind about the important competencies that I think are critical. And I won't give it an example of leadership right now, but I'll just say how far you go in life to me really gets back to Dean Chamberlain's word about integrity and ethics. You cannot get too far in life without being an ethical person and an ethical leader who operates with integrity. And so, be true to yourself. But again, remember there is a bigger world around you, and there's bigger aspirations and goals. And be fair to people and treat people with openness and honesty. But at the end of the day, it's about integrity and it's about fairness to all. So, but I think those are elements of being a leader as well. So I'm going to stop here because I want to hopefully get some questions later. So I'll turn it over to the general.
Thank you, Dean Dawkins. And again, here what I think I heard was vision, mission, purpose, and end state. Teach, train, mentor, and lead. I heard that leadership was relevant, interdisciplinary, and universal. Shared governance equals collaboration, and the idea of values and being true to oneself, of course, requires you to know yourself. The old Socrates and the adage. So with that, let's move right along. And I would tell you up front that we're probably going to hear some common themes as we work the table. So Dean Yendel Hoppy, maybe ditto by the time he gets to her. So let's go ahead and move to Dean Locks from the Brooks College of Health.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It is an honor to be here, and thanks to all of you for coming out. I will admit right off the top that I was tipped off that this would be largely a group of students, and frankly, I tailored what I'm talking about tonight to all of you. So, not that I think it's limited to you, but I think that was certainly my goal. I wanted to start off by, people ask this question all the time, what's the difference between managers and leaders? And of course, you could probably get 6 different answers from people up here. So I'll tell you mine. Managers for me are individuals who oversee things, processes, reports, budgets, day-to-day sorts of things. And those are critical people. And they're what I call operational, right? Now, when I talk about leaders, I think more of people who are inspirational. So these are your innovators, these are your creative thinkers, your outside-the-box thinkers, your people with vision, and mostly at the end of the day, and probably the most critical piece, they're the people who deal with people and know how to deal with people, know how to push the right buttons, and know how to motivate. And so I think those are critical distinctions. And what I'm going to talk about tonight is clearly going to be focused on the latter. Okay? I will admit to having stole a number of my comments tonight from somebody I really like, and I won't get into who this person is. If you're interested, I'm happy to share the information. But among other things, this gentleman talked about something that he called a leadership litmus test, and this is really going to set the stage for my comments. And what he said was, and I want to make sure I get this right, if you had no title or a position, could anybody be inspired to follow you? Think about that a second, because most people by default, when you start talking about leadership, you immediately jump to what's your title, what is your supervisory position. It's something very official. And my comments tonight are not going to be focused on that. They're going to be focused on what we call non-titled leaders, because I think that's really critical, and frankly, it applies to probably most of you in this room tonight. And it's something I think you can take away tonight and use immediately, and not have to wait till some future date when you have a title to then, put this into play. So who are these people? Non-titled leaders are those who lead from a position other than a position of power. And again, we're used to always thinking about leaders being people who have power, and I'm hoping to convince you that that is a very narrow-minded way of looking at things. So they're called to service rather than called to status. I'd love to say that was my quote that you could take and reference me, but I stole that one as well. So, but that's all right. It was a good quote. They emerge from something called a distributed leadership philosophy for those who follow this. And the idea is that leadership doesn't always have to come from the top down. It can be distributed, and frankly, in many instances, should be distributed. And I learned this firsthand. My background's in sports psychology, so I've worked with athletes and coaches at every level, from youth through professional over my career. And if there was one thing I continuously heard from coaches, is they were bemoaning the fact that they didn't have internal leadership. You always have coaching staffs for leadership, but they will tell you that's not enough. Your championship teams, and I think this goes beyond sports, are units who have leadership distributed throughout. Okay? So, non-titled leaders, just a few things, and this is not an exhaustive list. I'm going to talk about 4 things, and you could talk about 40. So, everybody could come up with a different lineup. But among these things is they strive to make things better for those around them. I really like that because it shows, certainly, or I think it suggests that this is not a selfish sort of person. This is a person who's going to sacrifice for the betterment of the team. Very much a teamwork sort of philosophy, and anybody who knows me in the short 7 months I've been at this university knows that I'm all about that. So I believe in that in a big, big way. Secondly, they assume personal responsibility. I'm sorry to say for many of the students in here, when you're stereotyped as a group, you probably know this, I don't know. One of the stereotypes against this generation is that you don't do that. And rightly or wrongly, it's probably just good to know that, and employers are looking for that sort of thing. So, but these people, they don't blame others. They will stand up and say, this is on me, I made a mistake, I failed, whatever it is. Even sometimes when it isn't necessarily all on them. And they also tend to lead by example. Right? And again, who doesn't want that sort of person associated with your organization? They also have something, and again, I want to make sure I get this right because I love the way the author said this. They have a relentless commitment to raise the bar every day. Think how cool that is. I love that statement. It didn't say they believe in quality, they believe in excellence, 2 terms that I think is very important but grossly overused these days to the point where I think we're getting insensitive to them. But you go up and tell somebody, this person has a relentless commitment to raise the bar every day. It sounds a little corny and a mouthful, but it's a pretty awesome thing. And so I like that. And those are people who are very dedicated. Those are people who have pride in what they do. And I will submit to you today, and this has over the last few years really become clear to me, that give me a group of people who have a lot of pride in what they do, we're going to go a long way. A long, long way. And so I'm always on the lookout for these types of people. The last one is they strive to leave a legacy, so to create some sort of positive footprint. And I love that too because that suggests to me that these are people who want to do something that's going to last. It isn't just about now. I want to create a culture. And we talk about this all the time on campus, and particularly in the Brooks College of Health, is what do we want? What are we trying to create here? What enduring qualities, characteristics of this college do we want the world to know about now and in the future? So I'm going to end with, again, a quote, not mine, that I think summarizes pretty well what I at least try to get across here with you tonight. And that is, we know that human organizations that effectively evolve during times of rapid change, and according to the author, he was indicating like we have right now, presently, These individuals leverage leadership from across the organization, not just from the top. And so that just kind of brings me full circle back around to what I talked about in the first place. And what is important, and I think the takeaway tonight is just what I said. There are opportunities right now, if you're looking for them, for you to step up and find your place where you can lead. And a lot of people don't want to lead because they're not very vocal. You can lead in other ways. And you don't have to be a completely balanced leader. Find what you are good at and institute that and start working on it now. This is the time to do it. If you are going to make errors or do things that don't work, I think I'd probably rather do them now than in some sort of future position where you really have a huge influence. But you're not going to know. It's like anything else until you get out there and do it. And I think I would encourage you today, if this is something you want to do, get out there and start practicing. And before that, probably, and I'll leave you with this last quote, a former football coach once said, the thing that's going to make you different tomorrow from the person you are today are the people you meet and the books you read. And I tend to really believe in that in a big way. And so start reading books from all different kinds of people on leadership. Coaches, CEOs, teachers, parents, and they're all leading. And once you have a good grip on that, and plus what you're learning in your minor, if you're in the leadership minor or elsewhere, then like I say, give it a shot, see where it goes. So anyway, I'm going to leave you there. Thank you so much again for being here tonight, and I hope you get something really valuable out of the evening.
Dean Locks, thanks very much. A great distinction there that you drew between management and leadership. I think I heard you say managers do things right, leaders do the right things. Management is about process, leadership is about people, and I think that management has a tendency to produce order and consistency, where leadership is that dynamic that produces change and movement. And that's what, that was the message that I think I took away from your comments here this evening. So thank you very much. No, I did not, sir. And so moving to Dean Rainbow, College of Arts and Sciences, please.
Thank you for having me here. So my disciplinary background is in philosophy, and so I'm a philosopher. And philosophers specialize in saying strange things that question basic assumptions. And the folks up here have gotten used to that, by the way. I've only been here 6 months, but they already used to it. So I'd like to start by questioning a basic assumption of this forum. I'd like to start by suggesting that you should all leave immediately, that there's nothing we have to say to you. And then I'll turn around and grant that basic assumption and offer some somewhat probably, I thought they were going to be strange, but actually they're not as strange as I thought they were after hearing my colleagues speak, which makes me really happy. So I'd like to start off by asking, how many of you have a cat? Right. Look around. Fair number of cat owners, right? And so you probably could give some pretty good advice about how to take care of cats, right? I don't really have a cat, and so if I were buying a cat, you could tell me how to take care of a cat, change the litter box, what kind of food you should put out, that kind of stuff, right? But can you take care of cats? Can you give good advice about taking care of cats? It turns out that the word cat has two meanings. If you look in the dictionary, I looked it up this afternoon. Here's the first one. A small domesticated carnivorous mammal with soft fur, a short snout, and retractile claws. Okay? So that's what you probably all have, right? But here's the second definition of a cat. A member of the biological family Felidae. So that's tigers, that are cats, jaguars, that are cats, cheetahs, that are cats. And so your advice about how to take care of small domesticated carnivorous mammals with soft fur and a short snout and retractile claws, if used to take care of a tiger, would probably lead to bad results, right? You don't want to take out the tiger litter box in quite the same technique, right? So domestic cats and tigers and lions are very different when it comes to, they're very different things, and advice about caring for one is not really very good about caring for others. So my question to you is the word leadership like the first sense of the word cat, where it refers to one kind of thing? Or is it like the second sense of the word cat, where it refers to such a broad spectrum of things that there really isn't much to be said at all, that you're going to have to talk about leadership in business, leadership in higher education, leadership in the military, leadership in a restaurant. I was a kitchen manager for a long time, and that kind of leadership is very different than the kind of leadership I did. So I'd like to suggest that perhaps the word leadership is like the second sense of the word CAP. That's not like the first. And that there's not a single unified thing that is leadership, and so no one can really give you advice about leadership in general. They can only give you advice about leadership of a particular kind. It's like you can give you advice about taking care of tigers, or lions, or jaguars, or domesticated cats, but nobody can give you advice about taking care of the biological family, Felidae, because there's just too many different things in that group. So that's my crazy underlying, I'm going to question the whole thing assumption. So let's pretend that all I said was false, okay? That there is a thing that is common to all leadership, all kinds of leadership. What would that be? What could be common? I don't think it could be experiences, because there's two different experiences, two different kinds of leaders. I don't think it could be knowledge. I don't think it could be skills. I think if there's one thing that's going to be common, it's going to be a certain motivation. And let me start off with 3 motivations that I think you cannot have if you want to be a good leader. I don't think that you can be a good leader if you're motivated by a desire for fame. I don't think that's going to work. People are not going to want to follow you because you want to be famous. And I don't think that good leaders are motivated by a desire for fortune, for money. People are not going to follow you because you want to get rich. You might say, I follow you because you want to get rich. And I don't think that good leaders are motivated by a desire for power. Why should I want to follow you to help you get more power? I don't really see that, okay? So what's left? I think that good leaders are motivated by a desire to do good, by a desire to make the world a better place. And I thought that was going to sound very strange until I just heard my my colleagues speak, and they pretty much said the exact same thing. So my attempt as a philosopher to say something strange failed utterly because my 3 colleagues stole my line, basically. So my suggestion is if you want to be a good leader, you need to be motivated by a desire to make the world a better place. And you should be very, very sensitive to context, because it may well be that leadership in different contexts is a very, very different thing.
Wow. I think I know why I wasn't a philosopher. And Dean Tumio, thanks very much for not leaving since you haven't spoken yet, given the invitation to do so. I don't own a cat. Never have, never will. So I'm a little bit at a loss to interpret some of that, but I did hear what you talked about in terms of leadership dynamics and the context. You alluded to leadership in the basis of power associated with leadership, the referent, the expert, the legitimate, the coercive, the reward, and the notion of authentic leadership, being true to yourself, and that leadership takes form in context. And without context and circumstance, there's a vacuum. So thank you for your remarks, sir. So with that, let's move to construction, engineering, and computing.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here. I have to start out by saying it is an amazing honor to be sitting at the table with these people. If you ever get to be in a group of people that are as much fun as this, you're truly blessed. They are amazing, and it's just fun. And we give each other a hard time. I took kind of a different route to get to my position here. So since it's nonlinear, I tend to be a nonlinear thinker. And leadership, I have to agree with my friend George. I'm going to write that down on the calendar. Yes, date time. Yeah, I'm being swayed. That leadership is contextual, and you have to think about that. But I think there's some general things I'd like to give you some ideas, just what to think about in terms of leadership. A lot of it's been said, but I got a couple of different things I want to approach. First of all, we've heard a lot that leadership is doing what's good, trying to be good or the right thing. I'm not sure that's quite on the mark. I think that leadership is trying to do what's best for the group you're leading. And sometimes what's best and what's right, there's a little bit of distinction. That's where integrity and all those things come in, are very important. But if you're in fact leading, you're trying to do what's best for others in the group. And I think that's been consistent. It's not about a leader, it's about others. I think the other thing that's important is to be yourself, know yourself. And that means know your strengths and know your weaknesses. And don't be afraid of them, and don't try and hide them, and don't lie about them. Own them. That's just part of being you, and you can't lead others if you're not being you. So I think that's a really important thing. But I think there are some very important distinctions in leadership types. The type of leadership we see in academics and often see in nonprofits and in politics, as an elected official, is the same kind of thing. We often refer to as service leadership. And that's, you listen a lot, you try and build consensus, you have a lot of discussion, there's ambiguity, there's gray areas. That's a very important type of leadership, and it's very hard. But there's another type of leadership that I think we often confuse, and that's the direction leadership. The example I give is, you're a soldier and you're going to rush up the hill to take out a machine gun next. You certainly don't want your leader to say, well, let's talk about this and decide how best to approach it. Maybe we don't want to do it. In that kind of leadership, you need decisiveness, you need clear directions, and you can't have ambiguity. Otherwise, you're going to get people killed, and that would not be best for the group. So I think that there are times when leadership is directive, unambiguous, clear, and firm. And there are times when leadership is softer, the soft front, hard back, I like that statement, where you listen more, you have consensus. And part of the challenge of any leadership position is to figure out which one you should be doing at the time, right? So there's some thinking about that. But there are two things, I'll disagree with George on that, all cats are different. All cats eat meat. Such sometimes the meat's you. So there are some, that's true. There are some common things that go across. First, and I think really important, and this is the hardest way, is that there has to be a tolerance for risk. You can never move forward if you're so afraid of making a mistake or it going wrong. You won't be able to do it. You also can't move forward if you want everybody to like you all the time. Not going to happen. Okay? I want everybody to love me. Unfortunately, I know that doesn't happen. Occasionally, I may get to the majority, but who knows? But that's okay, because if you're trying to do what's best for everyone, there are going to be times when A, you mess it up, and B, people don't think you're right. And often we define leadership, or more to the point, who's a good leader, as someone in charge doing what we want them to do. Not necessarily what's best for the group or what's best for the university. I'm sure that Provost Chowley understands this because she has to do what's best for the university. It may not be best for my college. It really trips me off sometimes. But that's the nature of leadership, and sometimes that doesn't make her a bad leader. So you have to be able to separate those kinds of things when you're judging other people. But if you can do that, you can do that when judging yourself, because we all judge ourselves. So realize that sometimes, you're not going to do what everybody wants, but if you're doing what you think's best for the whole, and you're doing it honestly and giving it your best shot, you may not be right, but you know what? You're doing what you need to do. The corollary to that is, when you screw up, admit it. Don't be afraid to say, you know what? I really messed that up. And by the way, you were right. Let's back it up and see if we can do it the right way, and apologize for the errors you made along the way. Because it happens. It just happens. So I think that those are the kinds of things that are common about leadership across all the different types, all the different disciplines, even between a very directive leadership position versus a service leadership position. And the other thing I would add to that, and I would urge you, is no matter what you're doing, whether you're a non-position leader or a position leader, learn every day. There's always something to learn, and if you're not having fun, go do something else. Thank you.
Well, great comments. I'm going to bounce from you back to the comment made by Dean Rainbolt and cats, and just go on record by saying I think the Provost knows a little bit about herding cats. So, and with that, the concept, the notion of nonlinear leadership, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, Steve Jobs, and so many others who were not linear whatsoever in the way that they approached leadership. What's best for the group, in terms of leading, certainly the utilitarian concept that many leaders adapt when they grapple with authentic and servant leadership styles. Leaders build trust. I thought this was incredibly important. Leaders build trust when they have the time to do so, when they have to be directed. They cash that in. And their followers will know to trust them that it is the right thing to do. And so that's why soldiers rush up those hills to do what their leaders tell them to do. And invariably, leadership is risky. Brene Brown will tell us that. You're vulnerable and you're often exposed as a leader. And leadership, as a result, can be very lonely. So I appreciate your comments, and thank you. And last but certainly not least, the College of Education and Human Services, Dean Diane Yendel-Happy.
Well, thank you. Anyone in here have a last name that begins with Z? Okay. You guys know that we always sit at the end of the line, right? And so our entire lives we've heard everyone else go first. And we have all learned how to use that to our advantage. So I want to take this moment to focus not on leadership generally, and not even on, because they've done a really good job of laying those principles out for us. And not on leadership really in my entire college, because my entire college includes areas like higher education and sport management. But I want to take this opportunity to talk to you about leadership in education focused on K-12, and with a focus particularly on public education. I have the privilege today, ironically, to sit with my now 76-year-old former principal from when I taught in DC. And later on, when I was at Penn State and when I went to Florida, I worked for her. She was the superintendent of Baltimore City Public Schools, and I'm sure you can imagine that task. And I told her that I was coming here today, and I started asking her some questions, which then really messed up everything I was going to say to you. Really messed it up, because what reminded me, it brought me right back to just how complex yet how important this leadership work is. And so I just kind of want to start out. He asked us to define it. So I took a stab and basically would say that leadership is that dynamic that enables and motivates groups of individuals to work together to make things better. For their organizations, in my case, public schools particularly, but ultimately that impacts the world around them, right? Now, I don't know how George got to claim making the world a better place, because as Provost Challey knows, it's on the wall of my college. And how did I get it? I got it from a military leader. You know, there was a time in our college when I first got here that I was losing sight about why our college was so important. Now, how can that be? The dean of a college of education lose sight of that. Well, you know what? The politics started happening around us in education. And even walking in tonight, my what was our escort called? Yeah, from sport, where are you? There you are. We were talking about the image of education and teaching, right? And so Harry Ulrich, former admiral in the Navy, who's on my Dean's Advisory Council, said to me and reminded me, he said, Diane, your college is about making the world a better place. So as a leader, you have to think and listen and ask. It's like in the midst of this, I grew up in an education family, I've lived it my entire life, and as a leader, I had to step back and listen to him. And he brought me really something that we can all stand behind. And that was really exciting. There is a career ladder in education. A lot of people don't think there is. Let's dispel that. I am a dean. I started as a 4th grade teacher. There is a career ladder in education. There are a lot of people that start as educators and end up as superintendents that handle $500 million to $1 billion budgets in urban districts. There is a career ladder in education. But there's also distributed leadership in education, right? So Kurt talked a little bit about that. You folks don't have to be in education and take a formal leadership position. Teachers lead from the classroom every day. And by the way, that's the only way that schools are going to change. Only when every teacher in every classroom leads every day will schools really change? So, when you think about, is it taught, is leadership taught or not? Well, I would argue that, some people have a leg up. For example, my colleague here is very extroverted, okay?
Where are my pearls?
Yeah. That makes it easier for him to step into things. I'm going to be honest with you. By the time I get home at night, I'm tired. I am not an extrovert. Every bit of my energy with people is gone, and I need to regroup, okay? So there is something that some leaders naturally bring and can use, but that doesn't mean you can't be a leader if you don't have those opportunities or that disposition. By the way, just having the ability to stand up and talk to people and get people's attention is not enough because the work is too complex. There's too many things that you have to get in place and learn and understand in order to be a leader, right? So that is really important because when you're in class, right, you're learning about some leadership theory. Is it Powers and Raven that talk about the different types of leadership? I can remember that from my leadership classes all the time. I will say that I don't sit back and think, okay, which one are we going to use now, right? But there are things that you bring to the table from those experiences, but it's also the ability to learn from each and every experience you engage in as a leader. You don't want to repeat the same mistakes over and over again. And I can tell you sometimes it's scary here when I'm leading because I've been at 5 higher ed institutions now, and I can remember going through some of the very similar problems again. And it's tricky because it's a different situation. But I had learned something that I don't want to repeat that mistake. I'd rather make a new one, right? Right? So this notion of learning about leadership as you go. But I do think there is something that we really have to pay attention to in public education. And that is that of diversity and equity. Folks, we have got to do a better job. And the only way that we can do that is if the leaders, every level of leadership, is committed to making sure that every child gets a quality education. And that began with the Brown versus Board of Education, and we are still fighting it, and we need to do better. We need to do better every day, every one of us. And that's going to take a nation of leaders, for sure. And that is why our college says partnering to make the world a better place. Because our college can't do it alone, but our college produces about half the teachers in Duval County Public Schools. We need to do better. So when you think about what our product is really about not only preparing people for the job and the workforce and the careers, but it's also for active civic participation. And so that's why all of us, no matter what area you're in this room, needs to lead for this. So what are some of the things that I think are really, really super important in cultivating a leader in education? One is this understanding of equity. We have to pay attention to it in all policies and all practices. We have to think about the complexity of every issue. We could go on forever on that, but we need to understand complexity. We need to persist. Persist, persist, persist. Don't give up, go back, try again, try a different way. There will be conflict and barriers, don't give up. That notion of learning from the general, learning from your colleagues, learning from the student. We need to think about second order change. I hope you learned about that. If you haven't, it's transformational. And courage, because that persistence is going to require you to have a great deal of courage as you work through your day as a leader in education right now. So for those of you that are, practicing leadership right now in smaller ways, take on the hardest problem you can find and just chip away at it and ask people for help along the way. But try a hard one. Try a hard problem and try to see if you can make a difference. There's 2 slogans. I'll stop because I am over. I took up his time. I learned that you can't mandate what matters. But a trick is you can resource what matters. And so when your leaders aren't resourcing what matters, then you need to come to the table and talk about how to get those. And you need to lead through people in education. You have to distribute the leadership, because if we don't lead through people, we won't be able to accomplish this most amazing task.
Okay, Dean, thanks very much. Too much to cover in my comments to recap what you've said, but I will pull out just a couple things that I thought were pretty terrific. The focus on leadership in terms of education. Leadership enables, motivates to make things better. You talked about Myers-Briggs types. That's foundational. I invite Kelly Harrison into my classroom every year and cede 2 of my classes to him because he gives such a tremendous presentation on the dichotomies and how people will come to know themselves better by understanding Myers-Briggs. In terms of national security, this is a leap, but I'll go with Harry on this. The greatest threat to national security is not Russia, not China, not North Korea, and it's not Iran. It's an uneducated American population. And we have to understand that going in as we look at the student population that we have here in front of us. Blended leadership and leadership styles, direct, delegate, coach, and support, diversity, equality, and equity. We've talked about, I think, some of the precepts that Cody is famous for, the Council on Diversity and Inclusion, second order change, transactional leadership versus transformational leadership, a distinction that all too often we don't make. And I really like the comment, resource what matters. And I think leadership matters. And so with that, we're going to go to our question and answer period here. The microphones are located in the center aisle. You're invited to form a line and approach the microphones. And first come, first serve. So have at it with the deans. Okay, Nemo, you're up here first.
Wow, it was a long line. My question to all of you is, as deans and leadership, with leadership, no matter what position you're in, if it's fourth graders or where you are now, if a conflict or an issue arrives, how do each of you deal with it and use your separate powers to fix the problem, whether it be a system or faculty issues? How do you apply critical thinking to these solutions?
So I'm going to suggest that not all the deans answer that unless there's really strong feelings. Is there any one of you who want to tackle that one as a preference? Yeah, I know. So with that, you said fourth grade, so I'm going to go to Dr. Yindel-Hoppe.
Wow, it's funny because of all the people up here that to ask that question to, I'm probably the worst at it. And that is because I don't like conflict, right? So is there a magical method that you use? No, absolutely not. I think the most important thing for me to handle conflict is, first of all, for me to stay calm. I need to feel grounded. I need to feel calm. I need to feel like I'm ready to listen, because I can't help solve a problem unless I can really hear the problem and hear the different perspectives. So I think my personal advice is to really maintain yourself, and then to be a very good listener, and then ask others' opinions about also how to help solve a problem. And I'm not talking about a simple problem, but I'm assuming you're talking about a complex problem.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that really takes a village to solve. I rarely have the answer. I usually have an answer.
I will follow on the next. Diane said, I have the advantage of being an extrovert. She has the advantage of being calm. I think all my colleagues will admit that I am an extremely passionate individual, and conflict sometimes incites stronger emotions in me than is probably appropriate for the circumstance. I know that's a surprise. Yeah. The key for me, and you're going to have to figure out your own techniques. First of all, fortunately in this group, they know me and they'll let me vent, because that's exactly what I'm doing, right? And then afterwards, I have to calm down and say, first of all, I often have to apologize for being an asshole. Excuse my French. I shouldn't have said that. I said it too strongly. Don't send it in email, please, for God's sake. And then you can start to figure out what the real problem is that caused the conflict. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to be because you were using the same word to mean different things, something dealing with communication, so that one person didn't hear what the other person was saying, acting, whatever. And so once you get by the emotional part, if you're blessed to be calm at the beginning, you can do this real quickly and not cause more problems. Find out what the communication underpinning was that went wrong, and you can diffuse almost all conflict.
And we have a great course in the leadership minor in conflict resolution. That might be something you want to look at as you pursue that leadership minor.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to this young lady over here.
Hi, my name is Mariana Dowell. My question for you is, as a business student, as a woman, as a member of the millennial or X generation, what is the main takeaway that I'm supposed to take from the Dean Leadership Forum that I can bring into my career for the future after I graduate, which will be this
Dean
semester?
Hawkins, I think that's to you, sir.
Well, hopefully we would all say similar things if you asked it of any one of us. And my response is, I think everyone should take away from here the importance and value of being true to yourself and who you are, and living your life and understanding that life is not fair, and we all get bumps along the way. You don't want to hear that, but that's the truth. But at the end of the day, you've got to be true to yourself and who you are. And the first question that was asked about conflict, you cannot avoid all conflict. And so just realize that. I mean, there are times when I choose to disagree with people. I mean, it is what it is. So, but at the end of the day, I want to make sure I can look in the mirror and say, I've been true to myself in what I'm trying to accomplish. And I keep my eye on the prize for what I'm trying to accomplish, and let other stuff roll off, probably more than I should let stuff roll off, but I'm pretty good at letting stuff roll off. Provost Challey can probably tell you that. But again, I mean, be true to yourself. At the end of the day, be true to yourself. Live your life.
Just to add on to that a little bit, not all of us are good at letting things roll off our back, and I'm not. I have had to learn to let things go and vent privately. So when I leave from a dean's meeting, I may be screaming in my car. But I have learned to calm down, and then the communication piece, go if there's a meeting and somebody is at you in a meeting and they're belligerent and they're just accusing you. I've had that happen. Then you have to own up and go approach that person and find out what the communication problem was. What really are they trying to get at? Because usually it's something below the surface that you have to figure out. Somebody is against something because they're threatened by something you're not even aware of. So the communication piece is really, really vital, but you have to know how you are going to deal with that situation. He can let it roll off. I go express and vent to someone else. I may go ride my bike 50 miles, whatever I have to do to get that energy out and to settle down before I can then address the problem. But it is, be true to yourself, but do what's right and don't just react. Don't just spout back what you're hearing when you've got an issue.
Please see me afterwards.
Hi.
Okay, let's come over here.
Hi, my name is Deja Brown, and my question really derives from what Dean Locke said about leaving a legacy. I wanted to know if each of you had one point about how you can do that.
Dean Locke, that sounds like it's to you, sir.
When I was talking about that, I interchanged the term culture. And I think if you talk to people in leadership positions, you will find that word will come up very frequently. I don't care where you're leading, whether it's in a school, if it's on a sports team, in any sort of corporation or business, you will always always tend to hear that. And so I think for me, leaving a legacy means figuring out what's going to make this group successful. And you don't have to have it all figured out, but figure out a piece of it that you know you can address, that you're confident in yourself to address, and live that sucker. I mean, take it and run with it. And again, you can't do it by yourself, but especially if we're talking about distributed, you're going to pick up the ball and run with it on your own. And of course, that's going to change for different individuals. And I think that's an issue, and I'm glad you brought it up, that too many people have, and they almost get paralyzed and not willing to leave because they don't think they can do it all. Because frankly, most people can't do it all. So figure out what your strengths are and where you can really excel and live that thing. I talked about leading by example and being committed to it. People are going to see that. You're about my daughter's age, and I've told her, I said, you put it out there and you live it and you bring it every day, and you're consistent with it, people are going to notice. Consistency is one of those things that, again, you're going to hear people talk about a lot. Lots of people can do things really well on occasion. You find somebody who can do things really well and bring some leadership every day, no matter what's going on, boy, you've got yourself a winner there. So that would be my answer.
I would love to leave a legacy of a well-functioning organization, one that has grown, one that has developed, one that is flourishing. But you know that the thing ultimately is, even if you leave that, you can't control where it goes after that. That organization may actually fail after you leave. It would be tragic, and I'd be very, very sad if that was the case. But you know where my legacy is more than anything else? It's with the people I worked with in that organization while I was there. I knew she was a campus ministry, actually, at the first institution I taught at, who was relieved from her position, and the administration changed entirely the way the program went, and she was distraught. My legacy is gone. They've destroyed the program. My legacy is gone. And you know what? Her legacy was there because of all the people she worked with, all the people who had benefited from the extraordinary efforts that she made, and they knew it. And if people in an organization know that ultimately my goal is to help the vast majority of the people, and whether this is doing what's right or doing what is best for the people, it's still those people who are going to be the ones that are my legacy. So that's where my goal always is.
I think too often we think of legacy in too big of a context. I think that any one person that you help make better their life, you have a legacy. And so everyone in this room may already have legacies. That's your friend that you help pass a course. Just taking care of others is the legacy.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Miranda Brown. I have a question for Dean Locks, but anybody can answer it. You talked about how in a sports team, successful ones, you have the coach and then you have internal leadership. Do you have any ideas on how to establish internal leadership in a group?
How much time do you have? That's the question. Honestly, that coaches have asked me for years, and there isn't going to be an easy answer to that. So it is a multi-pronged kind of approach. It involves bringing groups together and finding ways for people to step up and lead, because you can't really see, sports has it wrong generally, right? What happens is coaches come along and they say, you're my captain. And whether that person is really the right person. And then what happens is everybody else goes, okay, I'm not captain, so I don't have to worry about this. I've loved working with coaches that have been very open and not control freaks, like most coaches are, and have said, we'll say, don't put out any captains. Let it happen organically. Let's see who steps up. And in training, when I work with coaches, and athletes, we will do activities that will demand somebody step up. And you put them in their groups, and it may have nothing to do with sports. And you see, we're going to find out how organically people step up and how they lead. And so you can buy books till the end of time, which shows you how to, activities that you can use to do that sort of thing. But I think it takes actual experiences, sitting in a room and talking about leadership, and people go, oh, that sounds great, and I'm going to do that, and then they don't, right? You've got to have scenarios, you've got to role play. I used to work with athletes on every team on the campus, and we'd bring 2 together every year, and we would do just that sort of thing. Say, here's a situation, play it out. Okay, this is why this didn't work. And when people would go back to their teams and try things out and come back and report to the group, and we would talk about, here's why it works, here's why it doesn't work. So I do think there's training that can definitely help, and it means you've got to get everybody on board, and you definitely have to get, talking about leadership, you have to get the person who has authority over that group on board, because if that person isn't on board and supporting it, the others that you're trying to train, they're going to pick up on that really quickly and go, yeah, it doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, it sounds great, but so you got to have that person really on board and contributing as well. So that's my thought. I'm sure my colleagues have some others. You want to tackle that?
So here's a good example, borrowing from the sport. I have a son that just graduated a few years ago from the University of Florida. He was a swimmer, really good swimmer, right? And they made him captain of the swim team. And then, as part of the work that the athletes have to do, they do a lot of volunteer work, right? And so he decided, and with a group of his guy friends, that they were going to start a tutoring for young athletes from the schools around Gainesville. So I was listening to him practice for his interview after he graduated, right? And he's a business guy, and he's trying to figure out how he's going to talk about leadership. So he started and he said, well, you know what, I was captain of the swim team, and that's the one that goes on the resume, right? And his response was really short about what he learned from that. But then he started talking about the tutoring he had to set up, right? Where they had a whole bunch of important jobs that had to get done in order for this thing to happen, right? And meaning like marketing, like contacting people, recruiting, building the tutoring program, getting the tutors. There was lots to do. What he talked about in that answer to that question was the fact that he brought people together and gave them purpose, and they each had a job. So he found the assets of the internal members of that group and connected them to what they could do best. And you know what happened? They had a pretty good tutoring. But I found that really interesting in his interview preparation, because I expected that whole thing to be around being captain of the swim team. And it was really around how to get people to work together in a group. And that's what he said. I thought it was pretty good for a 23-year-old.
Thank you.
He was a business major.
Okay, moving right along.
So I have 2 quick questions. The first one is, if there's something that you wish you had known or learned beforehand, or you wish someone could tell you this advice, what would that be? Oh. Okay.
That's a philosophy question.
Don't change litter box for a tiger.
Okay.
That question is hard because there is so much I wish I'd known about 20 years ago. That would be because I've made so many mistakes. One that springs to mind right now is, and this may be something that and I think this is very context dependent. When I started out as a leader, I was really, and this goes to something that Martin was saying, I was trying to please everybody. And I learned that why now I have what I call the 85% rule. That if 85% of the people are thinking this is a good idea, then you need to move forward. Trying to get that last 15% is probably going to be A, a waste of time, and B, very time consuming, and going to lead to immobilism. So that's one thing that I try to go for. Yeah, you just go 51? Yeah, I go for 85. We have different strategies. I go for 85. I go for 85% to try to, so that would be one. And then, this is going to sound a little bit, embarrassing or hokey. But I think it's really important to just recognize that you screw up a lot and not beat yourself up about it. Every day before I go to bed, this is true. Okay, you're gonna think I'm really, or you already think I'm weird because I did the cats thing, right? But you're gonna think I'm even really weird.
I love the analogy.
Every day before I go to bed, I sit down and I think about, and I list and think in my head of all the mistakes I've made, and I forgive myself for all this. Because otherwise, I'll just stew all night long. I think, okay, you made that mistake, George. That's okay. You're gonna be all right. So every night before I go to bed, I list all my mistakes, and then I say I forgive myself for them. Otherwise, I won't go to sleep. I'll just stew about them.
Okay, so I'm going to be the bad
Yeah,
guy.
sometimes it takes me. Sometimes I don't go to sleep at all. As he said, I finally get through them all.
I'm sorry, I could not.
I'm going to limit you to one question because we have a number of other students who are in line here. So, yeah, please stay. The deans have volunteered to hang out till midnight.
Can I answer that question real quick?
Of course.
So,
Executive authority.
just what I wish I had known is that it's going to be okay, that you become a leader bit by bit. You don't go from being, a student to a CEO. It's gradual, and you'll get more responsibility as you go, and you are going to make mistakes, and it's all going to be okay. It's going to all work out all right. I love the phrase from the film, and maybe there's a philosopher behind it, but everything will be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end.
Yogi Berra.
Yogi Berra said that? But seriously, you do what you can and be satisfied each day with the little bit of progress you make. Some days you have great progress. Some days it's bit by bit. Some days it's backwards. But in the end, it'll all come out all right.
Thank you so much.
Over here.
Hi, my name is Logan Kilpatrick. I'm a criminal justice major, and I'm taking the leadership minor. My question to nobody in particular is, how do we make the leadership minor more visible on campus? Because myself, I had to kind of accidentally stumble upon the leadership minor in order to discover it. I was lucky enough to have General Schrein come into the class and talk about the program, and that was the only way I found out about it. So how can we make the leadership minor more visible to those who might not know about it? I'll try to fix this.
It was not a planned question, Dean. Provost.
Yes. I'll try to respond to that and say that I believe that General Tarn has made efforts, and he's reached out to the deans, and we've all gotten together and met with the provost, and we've talked about how to make leadership more visible on campus. And so hopefully we have some ideas and some initiatives coming that will ingrain it throughout our curriculum and throughout our separate colleges in different ways. So, I mean, I'm pretty excited to say we're looking forward to working with the General. But I think my fellow colleagues here, it'll be done differently in each college. But I think every college is going to have an opportunity to have their students infused with leadership going forward. So I'm pretty excited about that opportunity.
But I was serious. Deans can talk to their students all day, and it goes in this ear if it goes in, it comes right out the other. But if you, as a student, talk to your peers about why it's important and what you're learning and how it helps you, you'll get a lot farther. And you tell 3 people, those 3 people take 3 people each, and you can do the math. So it's really something that if the leadership minor is important to you and you think it's going to help people be better, go for it.
Thanks for the question. See the disperser before you leave. Okay. Cynthia.
So I first want to go ahead and thank you all for sharing your leadership experience with us. It's been eye-opening, and we've all probably gotten to take away at least one thing from this. My question is, what is it that your college or the university can do in terms of enhancing student leadership development in order to be more connected out in the community?
I can tell you what we're doing right now, but I'd love more ideas. So we talked about urban education a little bit earlier, and we are in the process of putting together a network of what we're calling centers of excellence in the community, where we're nurturing teacher leadership in both our teacher candidates, in practicing teachers, supporting them, in principals. So that whole group of folks. And we've also opened the Center for Urban Education and Policy, and we're trying to bring people together to help support change in the communities and with children and around families and so forth. And I know there's some representatives in this room from that center right now. So those are two initiatives in the college that we're really trying to do to encourage undergraduate engagement in leadership.
I'd also add that I think that in some ways the push for the community involvement is, if I can borrow Kurt's distinction, I think a management issue, not a leadership issue. Because, at least in my experience, there's no shortage of desire to do this among the students and faculty. We just maybe need to have a little bit better structures. And in fact, we were talking in a recent meeting about some really boring stuff about promotion and tenure and contracts and stuff like that, which we're not going to talk about here because it's so boring. But it's also, sometimes management is important, and I do think there are some management barriers. So it's not really a leadership issue. I think there's just so much support for this around campus, but I do think there are some management issues. And deans are leaders, but we're also responsible for management. So I do think there's some management issues there as well.
Cynthia, thank you for your question.
Thank you.
With the Dean's permission, we'll take one more question, and then perhaps we can engage with the students thereafter. We got time? It's up to it. I don't want to hold you hostage here. All right. Dean Tumio is in charge. Tennessee?
Right. My question could be anything if they want to comment later, but specifically for Dr. J, and you probably know him as Steve J, is that it's a concept I think John Maxwell came up with, where leaders have there's different levels of leaders, and where people can fall in different categories, 5 levels in total. And what's interesting about the later levels is it's not just that people are good leaders, it's that they can train people to become better leaders. My question for you is that as Hicks Honors, one of the goals is to try to train people to train leaders, is what do you want to focus on in particular to inspire and train people to lead later on in life?
I mean, it ultimately goes back, I think, to what Dean Yendelhoppe was saying in terms of making the world a better place. And the question is, how do we, in general, all become problem solvers and people who can act on solutions? So it's really a question of taking smaller issues and applying the problem-solving skills to those, and then moving into bigger issues and developing those as we go. I mean, I'd love to see all of us think of global sustainable development and our place in that, and how we actually are participating. And every single one of us is involved in some ways. And yes, so some of us are teaching. In fact, some of us are more natural teachers than others. Some of us have to learn how to teach not content, but skills. And a lot of that is by learning how to place or give responsibility strategically, to read people and see where they're good, where they need help, but also to be giving them responsibility at pivotal times. This is true of students too. I have found that when you give responsibility, people tend to step up, and then you can talk about how that went, and then you give more responsibility and they move up again, to the point that in many cases some student groups are working better than some of the ways that we might as administrators put things in place. So to the extent that we can develop that kind of leadership, that kind of working within an organization, everybody wins. Everybody is leading, and everybody is growing, and everybody is ultimately making that contribution to society and ultimately to the world. I'm not sure if that even gets close to answering your question, but it's a start maybe.
Thank you very much.
Provost?
I just have to say a big thank you to you, General, and to the Taylor Leadership Institute for putting this together. But most of all, I just have to thank all you colleagues. I want to thank you for who you are and for how you work every single day to make this place better than it was. And you are an amazing group of colleagues. One more thing, the reason that I was kind of late was because I was trying to convince a student in the elevator that I wasn't Diane Yendel-Huckett.
So with that, I'm going to also say thank you very much to the deans for your time and willingness to participate in this forum. Thank you for your wisdom. Thank you for your wit. And thank you, perhaps most of all, for your leadership. And we're prepared to adjourn right now, but let me remind everybody, if you'd please fill out an evaluation form on your way out and drop it at the table. And we have a buffet reception, and the deans have promised to hang out for a few minutes and entertain some additional questions. Thank you all very much for your time this evening.